Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are going to paint a tornado in a field. Now this is actually a quite simple painting, and I believe that the absolute beginner could absolutely do this painting. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so that you can paint with me every week. And then check out the video description below for a full list of materials. Now let's get started. All right, today I have a 12 by 16 inch canvas, pretty much same as always, fresh out of the package. I have not gessoed it or anything. And the first thing I want to do is kind of decide where I want the different elements of my painting. So I'm going to take my 1/2 inch flat brush, and yes, this is my 1/2 inch flat brush. This is the sample from when I was getting my brushes made. I left my other brush at home today. So I'm going to wet it in my jar. And I'm just going to use a little bit of kind of watery black paint. I'm not worried about underbinding it because I'm going to paint over all of this. I just want to get a little bit of paint so that I can come back to here and kind of decide where my different elements are going to be. So I want to decide where the darkness under my tornado is going to be. And I'm going to kind of put it right there. See how watery and thin my paint is. Kind of generally in this area, and I can make adjustments to it even once I start filling it in. So none of this is set in stone. Maybe kind of like that. Maybe I feel like that's a little too far out. I don't know, we'll see. Give ourselves a couple of options. And the actual tornado itself, it doesn't just come from the bottom here. Don't draw it coming right out of the bottom there. If you put it up into this area, it's going to seem much more dimensional, much more 3D. So we'll kind of pull that like that and just let it twist in a way that feels the most natural. Don't try to make it twist in any particular direction. I think that's pretty good. I need my horizon right about in here. And I might have it come up just a little bit over here. I'm going to have a little bit of a house here. Again, I'm just kind of saying where that is going to be. I'm not worried about making that look like anything. Maybe we'll have a tree behind it here. Maybe there'll be another one over here. And I kind of like the idea of a fence. Now I know it might seem silly to kind of block all of that in, only to paint over it again. But for me anyway, I find that as long as I've sketched it out, in my mind, it's kind of burned in there. I know where all of my different elements are going to go. And so it's okay that I paint over it. But if I don't sketch those out first, then my brain still doesn't really know where it's going to put anything. So I'm going to go to my 1 inch flat brush now, and I'm going to wet it in my jar. And now I've got some burnt umber with my Mars Black and titanium white. And for my sky, and you can really use any colors you like. You don't have to use burnt umber with the Mars Black. You can just pick 2 colors that make a really nice dark color that you like and go with that. I kind of wanted kind of a vintagey looking sky, so that's why I picked the burnt umber. I almost went with a blue mixture, but I liked the mood of the burnt umber the best. So I'm just kind of loosely mixing them. It doesn't matter if it leans more toward black or brown. And every time I come back, I may pick up a different mixture. So I'm just going to put a tiny speck of white in there because I don't want it to be pure black, you know, just a little hint of a lighter color. And I'm going to come up in here and just kind of start laying that dark color in. This is all the tornado area where I'm putting this. So even though my tornado is going to have some lighter bits in it, I want the base color to be nice and dark. And I think that ended up being a little closer on the side of black than brown, and that's okay. The little bit of variation that you get in there will, I feel like it'll give your tornado and clouds a little bit more life and vibrance, because it wouldn't be all just one solid color in real life. Now, even though we drew a line there, don't draw a line here. Don't come in and do that. You know, just right over top of it. Nice soft area. See that? Just focus on getting all of those little specks covered. Don't worry about the tornado part right now. We are going to come back and put that back in later. Let's get a little bit more white. And I'm going to start right below where I left that color off and work up into it. And then right back down. See, back and forth, different directions. With this being a tornado, you know, the sky is very turbulent and the air is moving in all kinds of directions. And with that, anything caught up in the air is moving in all different directions. So don't feel like you have to go, you know, side to side. Heavy pressure like that to lay that paint down. Light pressure, see my brush isn't bending anymore, to blend it in and get rid of the ends of brush marks. Quite a bit more white. I'm not picking up the black brown anymore. If you feel like you need a little extra in there, you can pick it up, but I'm not picking it up anymore. Still starting right below that color, right up into it. See, I'm not being shy. I went almost up into the dark area with that. Light pressure to get rid of those hard brush marks. And we're almost done with our sky. Light pressure there. And still just white, so the bottom is going to be even lighter, but see, there's still that black-brown mixture. If I put a good amount of pressure on my brush, I'm going to get a much darker color than what you're seeing right there. So just be aware of that with how much pressure you're putting on your brush. Not only will you deposit more paint, but you'll deposit some of that darker color as well. See, I put just a little bit more pressure and it's darker. Which, you know, isn't bad if you decide, I want it darker right there. So I put a little bit more pressure there and I got some of that color. It's just all in what you want. Light pressure. All right. I feel like my sky is good. I'm going to come back into my black brown. I didn't clean it off. That white is still in there. I'm just going to darken up that color. And I'm going to put out a little ultramarine and a little cadmium yellow medium. And that doesn't really matter. Use whatever yellow you have. I like the ultramarine because it doesn't make a bright, vibrant green. It gives us a little bit more of a natural green. That, and when it mixes with the burnt umber, it really grays it down. And I want to have green, but I don't want to have green. You know, I don't want vibrant green. I want a dull green. So I'm going to pull some of this ultramarine in there till I can see the blue, and then a little bit of yellow. I'm not going for even a very obvious green right now, just a really dark, kind of neutrally color. I think that's probably good. See, it's a very, very grayed out color. I'm going to come back to here. I'm using the edge of my brush. See that? Back and forth. Don't be afraid to overlap your sky. See how it's giving me a nice fuzzy horizon. I don't want a real obvious and solid horizon. If this is a really windy day with that tornado, you know, all kinds of dust and grass and everything is going to be blowing around in the air, and we're probably not going to have a real solid horizon. All right, I'm gonna go back to my 1/2 inch and I'm gonna get that black-brown mixture again that just has a hint of white in it. Very, very close to what we did in the top corner of the sky. And I'm gonna start putting my actual tornado part back in. So we'll say it's kind of right here. And comes down about like that to there. That's okay that I'm picking up those other colors and it's blending in a little bit. Just fill it in loosely. Just kind of scrub that back and forth just to get rid of any lines. I'm not worried about the colors mixing. I just don't really want any lines because lines are harder to cover. Okay, now let's start really putting in our highlights and giving our tornado some dimension. So I'm gonna get that same color, my black-brown mixture. And again, whenever I come back, I'll do it a little bit different. Sometimes it'll be more brown, sometimes more black. And I'm gonna mix that color up with a little bit of white so that it's a bit lighter and I can start outlining where my highlights are gonna be. For the most part here, I'm gonna be using the tip of my brush and just kind of see, just little short kind of flicks. Longer out here toward the edge. A little bit shorter, and you can even do kind of this bounce thing. Let me show you what I'm doing over here with that. It's kind of like making a U like that, except I'm putting a little bit of pressure. So I kind of put pressure and do it and bounce up onto the tip. It's almost like a dash like that. See how I go pressure up, pressure up, pressure up, but I'm doing it quick. But whatever you need to do, if that doesn't make sense to you, please don't do it. But either way, I'm doing smaller shapes here toward the tornado and longer, a little bit more flowing shapes out there. And I know this color's not showing up real well just yet. Let's add a little bit more white, see if that's better. So see, short little brush strokes. And now I'm gonna come in with super light pressure and kind of start dusting them away. Not on both sides. If you dust it away on both sides like that, you're just gonna get a very flat looking blended cloud. So see, I just kind of did that on the top. I may come down in places on the bottom and blend a little part out. Kind of pull it back here a bit. So I'm using the edge of my brush and I'm gonna make a longer swipe, see that? And then super light pressure. See, my brush isn't even bending. Barely touching. And it's just breaking that line up. And if you do that just right with the pressure and the amount of paint you have on your brush, it doesn't matter if the dark color underneath is wet or dry. You should be able to get that nice soft look either way. So can you see how much paint is on my brush? But right here on the tip of my brush, there's really not much. So I just picked up a tiny speck of white on that side of my brush. And I'm gonna come in here, let's see, how about right here? Let's keep building the highlights here. And I'm gonna put a nice long streak of that white. There's still a good amount of paint, but no pressure. But if you're not getting the blend that you want, like I'm not really getting that there. It's happening a little bit, but not quite as much as I want. Then I'm just gonna come back in here and picked up just as much of that brown black as I did of the white a minute ago. And the same thing with super light pressure. I'm not putting a ton of pressure on this brush. Let's pull that line out just a little bit, just soften it. There we go. And again, see, I don't have a hard line here. I want it to almost be completely ambiguous as to when the tornado stops and the sky in the distance begins. I don't want a real hard line between the two. Grab a little bit more white. And let's kind of pop a little bright spot right in here. See, much shorter brush strokes there. Kind of billow it down a little, back up, and lighten my pressure to get a bit of blending. Now I'm trying not to use matte medium with every single painting because I know a lot of you don't have it. But if you like to use matte medium like I do, if you were to pick up the tiniest point of matte medium here, it would help with this part. But I'm going to try and do it without. See, I'm still just adding a little brighter spots. We're not going white though anywhere, not yet. We will, but we're going to build it just a little bit. Let's get just a little bit more white. I did pick up a little bit more of that black-brown mixture so that I don't get too light in here. And let's pull a light spot in there. See how I billowed it? Kind of started up here, came down, back up. Don't make these highly regular, angular lines. You know, work in small patches and let something kind of billow in one direction and back the other direction. See how my brush is almost moving in a circle? And I kind of hit the canvas and off. I'm not creating circles on here. My brush is only hitting at the bottom of that movement. You can get just the tiniest point of water. I just stuck the corner of my brush into that water, mixed it in. That's also going to help kind of get that little bit of a blend going. Let's just break that line up there. Tiny, tiny speck of water. I just want to break that spot right there. Should we start bringing this down into our tornado a little? I'm still using the edge, kind of the corner, kind of just hitting the corner of it on there. That might still be just a little bit wet to work on. See, I kind of took it down to the canvas. So maybe we'll wait for a bit before we start doing the actual tornado. Let's go a little bit lighter. A little bit of water, just kind of mix it in on my brush. And a little bit more white than before. Still just the edge. Nice short little strokes there and break them up. A little bit of a longer one. Let's pull that down. Just get really free with this. You know, we're not necessarily painting a real realistic tornado. So don't worry about, you know, if your tornado looks fake or whatever. Just enjoy the layers. Watch how each layer changes the one below it, and you know how the colors kind of impact each other. And another thing that's fun to kind of mess with here is perspective. So, you know, rather than just highlighting everything around the bottom edge, kind of like what I'm doing right this very second, which is fine in places, but also kind of play with it and say, okay, I'm going to take this color up at an angle like that and see what happens. And to me, that kind of takes this cloud and it pulls it toward us a little bit closer. But there's no reason to just highlight the bottom edge. You know, I kind of did the same thing right here. A little bit of that light color there. And I pulled it up that way rather than, you know, along this edge here. Just find out what happens. Don't worry about going too light. Don't worry about that at all. This is the same thing like when we highlight anything else, you guys. If your highlights aren't right, if you don't like them, you can come back and change it with another color later. So far, I'm liking how this is coming out pretty good. That's a little too much white. I want to keep, you know, some highlight right in here, but I don't want it to be as bright. I just put a little bit of water on my brush. I don't want this area to be quite as bright as this area over here. So this might be about as bright as I take it here. I mean, I might put a little pop point here or there of a brighter color, but for the most part, that's about as bright as I'm gonna go in that area. Out toward the edge, we are probably gonna go brighter. Quite a bit brighter. Just a little dust of that in there. Maybe just a little dust here where it kind of meets the sky behind it. Just right there. All right, more white. And let's really start amping up the brightness over here. See, still just very controlled pressure. There is a lot of paint on my brush still. If I put too much pressure, I'm gonna lay all that paint down there. That's kind of an ugly spot right there. I'm not worried about it though. We'll come back to it. Remember what I told you before. If something happens that you don't like, don't immediately stop what you're doing and go fix it. Let it be. It doesn't matter. You can fix it. But sometimes if you try and fix it while it's still wet, you end up making it worse. Just little hints of this color as we move back. It's starting to really wear off of my brush. Let's start taking it down here. A little bit of extra water mixed in there and some white. Let's start on this edge. Still using just the little corner of my brush. Smooth brush strokes. Don't try to just outline the tornado. Pull a bit of it into there. You can start a highlight on one edge, pull it around to the other edge and back, and that's going to help it kind of get that twisty feel. Just kind of break that up a little. Let's get some dark in there because the sky was still light when I started filling it in. My tornado now is a little bit too light. So some of that darker color. And let's get our shadow back in over here. Don't worry about going outside. Let it be kind of fuzzy. See that? See how I went outside of my shape there? Tornado's not going to have a real hard, definite edge. It's made of, you know, wind and clouds and debris and all kinds of stuff. Just kind of covering up some of those highlights that were a bit much. There we go. I just put a little extra water into that mixture. Be sure of yourself here. You know, if you get in here and you're like, oh, I don't want to go outside of that line, and you choke up on your brush, and you get in there and work really slow and tight, your tornado is going to look like a rope. Don't make it look like a rope. Make it look like a really loose tornado. Let's pull a little bit of that white back in there. See? Nice and loose, working on top of wet paint. Went outside my line there. Perfectly fine with that. And let's pull a highlight coming from over here. Can kind of pull it that way a bit. Whatever you want to do. However you need to do it to make it look nice and twisty. I'll pull another one there toward the edge. When doing highlights, try to think outside of the outer edge shape. You know, I think that sometimes when we're new to painting, we think this needs a highlight, and so we put it just right on the outside edge here. But the outside edge might not be what's actually taking the light. You know, it could be the very center. It could go from what we perceive to be the back around to the front. So just be open to those kinds of things. Let's get some more dark. And just break some of that up. Light pressure. There we go. Nice and dark right back here. No hard line though, I don't want that hard line. Maybe I'll come back in a little bit with a different brush to finish it up. Let's go super dark. Let's take that same dark color and we'll come in here and start kind of introducing some of it. Just make sure that it's nice and dark right under here. And if anything got too light or weird shaped, see, we can dust over it and get rid of it. Kick it back, take that highlight down a bit, whatever we need to do. Now I'm not putting a ton of pressure on my brush. Can you see that? There is a lot of paint on this brush. But if I put too much pressure, I'm gonna cover everything here. So I'm using very light pressure just to really kind of hint at this darker color. See, I picked up a little bit of that white, but I can put a little extra pressure on it and paint it right out. So let me show you over here. See, that's about what I'm doing on my canvas. Very small amounts of paint. But see, if I put a good amount of pressure, there's a ton of paint on that brush. So pressure is everything. All right, I stood back and looked at this, and I'm not 100% happy with how it's looking. So I am gonna work a little bit looser and just see what I can do here. So I got a bit of a darker color, and I'm really gonna work on breaking that up, maybe using a little bit of extra water. I want this to seem quite billowy, but not, I feel like my colors are just a little bit too solid. But like I always tell you, you can always change anything, and sometimes the layers end up making things a little bit more interesting. Pulling that color through there a bit more, and down into here even. See how I'm letting that really feather out into the sky. Super light pressure is how we do that. Nice, long, narrow brush strokes right in there. Let's feather that out a bit. I think when I was working on developing this painting, I was working on a gessoed canvas, and I feel like I liked the texture that I was able to achieve much better. See, I'm getting some canvas texture in here, some breaking on the texture of the canvas, and I'm not in love with that. And the gessoed canvas helped me avoid that a bit, and I really liked that. So if you haven't started painting yet, maybe try it on a gessoed surface. And maybe, you know, if you're struggling, if you feel like you're struggling with the texture, maybe just stop and gesso it. But don't give up. Keep going back and forth, light and dark. Let's get a little bit more dark in there. It's the contrast that's really going to make this come alive. Let's get some shorter brush strokes in there. Some things a little bit messy right in there, where the tornado is the most turbulent. Light brush pressure. Pull that into that previous color. Heavy pressure to lay that color down. So see, even though that background color is dry, I'm getting a nice soft transition between them. This is looking much better already. I'm liking this much, much more. Little brush strokes. See that little those little waves, kind of laying the paint down and then breaking it up. A little blob of paint there, and break it up. Now I do want this corner to be the lightest area. However, if it's all light, there's not going to be much to look at. So you do still want to keep some of this dark color. So there's a good blob of it. And then light pressure to break it up. When you have really light against really dark, it creates a good amount of contrast, and it'll make the light color look lighter and the dark color look darker. So if you're struggling with something and you're like, this just doesn't look light enough, put something really dark next to it. Let's get a little bit of white. And we're going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to kind of lay some white in there. And there's still a good amount of paint, but I'm going to use light pressure and just start breaking it up. Let's even pull it up there a little bit. There we go. Much better. I'm starting to be much happier with this. Again, lay down a good blob of that white. Short, quick little brush strokes to break it up. Pull it into a few different directions. Let's just soften that line out, like how rough that line was. Pull it down here a bit. Remember, I said kind of mess with the perspective. Don't just say the highlight belongs there at the bottom edge. You get to define where there's a bottom edge by where you put your highlight. Let's go. Nice and light over here. Nice long brush stroke. So see, that's what I mean when I tell you guys, don't settle for highlights and lowlights that you don't like. If something isn't working for you, change it. You can always change it. Always, always change it. Nice and bright there. Kind of pull that down into here a little bit. See, there's really a loose a loose impression of where the tornado stops and the distant sky starts. And I really want to brighten it up right up in here. So I just picked up white. There is, of course, still a bit of that black-brown mixture on there. And I need a little bit of water. So I just kind of wipe that little corner of water, mix it in with what's on my brush. Back to my light pressure. Just helps me get rid of that canvas texture a little bit more. There we go. Yes, yes, this is looking so much better. So much better. See, again, it's those little circular very light pressure. Let's pop just a little bit of that over in this area. Maybe just a hint more water. A little bit of texture. This really is a quite simple painting, as long as you're willing to give yourself the time and the patience to work the highlights and the shadows. The techniques are not difficult. They really aren't. But I think it will take a little bit of patience to get the shadows and the highlights to do what you want them to do. If you're not going to give yourself that time and be patient with yourself, then you will probably struggle. But you know, painting, I told you this recently, painting should be you time. You know, it should be time when you are just doing something you want to do, spending time on yourself and enjoying the process. There shouldn't be any pressure. There's no reason to put pressure on yourself. You know, it really should be about the process, not the product. Sometimes I like to take a little bit of that light color, start in a light area, and just kind of see how far I can get it to go. You know, when you get a new load of paint, start in an area that you know you want to be light, and then lightly work it back into an area that's darker. You know, if I knew that I wanted this area to be that color, then I definitely wouldn't get more paint and go straight into it. Otherwise, it'll be too light. So I think I want to brighten that a bit. Break that up. And that little wet paint spot there, because I don't want my brush soaking. Don't completely submerge your brush and then come out with a dripping wet brush. Just touching the corner to the water and then even dabbing it on my paper towel a little, just to make sure it's not too overly wet. That's still a little damp. There we go. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this area now. I think I'm just gonna pull a little bit, some lighter colors over to this side, and then we can move on, finish up the tornado part itself, the actual twister, and move on to the ground. This is really, right here in the cloud area is where we're going to spend the most time on this painting today. So once we're done up here, we're more than halfway done with the painting. And I feel like we are pretty close to being done up here. See, I definitely don't want to leave those little bumps. Take that light color way up off the top of the canvas. A little bit of a highlight right there. Okay, our tornado isn't looking too horrible. I dipped my brush in my water a little and then daubed it off on the paper towel. Just a little bit of white. And the corner of my brush again. I'm going to go to these kind of short brush strokes rather than the longer ones. Get a bit more texture in there, I think. Barely touching right there. I don't want to deposit a lot of that lighter color up high there. Bring just a hint of it over to this side. Just wherever you think it's going to be interesting. There's not a right and a wrong here. Depending on how your tornado is shaped, your highlights might look better in completely different areas than on mine, and you get to decide that. But see again how I am kind of twisting it. I've got some lighter areas right there on this edge, and it comes around, now it's in the middle, now it's on this back edge, and immediately back over to this edge. So keep those little twists in your mind. A little bit of extra white. Light, light, light pressure there. Not too bad. Back to my dark color. Same thing with the corner. Not really caring for this little bit in the back here. Tiny bit of water. There we go. I'm just going to kind of kick it back a little. See, it's not completely covering it. We'll just let it start right about there. Cut a little dark spot in there. Just keep playing with the twists and turns until you have exactly what you want. And like I said, you guys, if it gets away from you and you don't like what's happening, just let it dry and come back to it. Just like when we do trees, or rocks, or anything else, you can make changes, as many changes as you want. Okay, I don't think that's too bad. I'm going to take that same dark color with the corner, and I'm just going to kind of scratch a little bit of this dust cloud looking bit over it. very lightly. Kind of take it out here a little bit. Let's get just a little hint of white. And see how I've got the white on one side but not the other? I'm going to use the corner of my brush, but I'm going to angle it so the white is kind of facing me, and that way I don't deposit too much of it. I just want a hint of a lighter color. I can slowly rotate the white toward the canvas. You know, if I go like that and it's not enough, I can rotate the white toward it. But I'd rather start with not enough white than end up with a big huge white blob right there. So again, see the white is kind of facing me. I'm not getting very much, so I kind of rotate it a bit. Maybe a little bit more. There. Let's just keep that same color on our brush. Just a little bit of water. Let's keep that same color about on our brush. And we're gonna block in our house. Now, if you're more comfortable doing this with a smaller brush or drawing the house on with a pencil first, that's perfectly fine. I'm just gonna do it with my brush, so I'm gonna decide where the pitch of the roof is and drag my brush straight down. Make the other side, make sure it's at the same angle, and drag my brush straight down. It's okay that it didn't fill in all the way. Take my roof back and down, and the side of the house. This is really just the house blocked in. Got a little piece of roof there. Maybe I need some more paint. And I think we're gonna have a little tree. Maybe one behind it too. So I got my black brown, some blue, some yellow, a nice dark green. Little extra water, there we go. Still just the corner of my brush. I'm gonna start with one here that's kind of behind the house. See how I'm just kind of like dotting, almost scratching it on. Don't worry if you go over top of your house. Take it all the way off the edge of the canvas. We'll bring it over here. Maybe there's a couple of trees growing around the house. And I'm gonna kind of tilt it back like that. Say it's kind of blowing in the wind. Let's do another one right here. Just kind of comes up. And it kind of blows back. Can pop a couple highlights on it a little bit. A little bit of a brighter green. A little bit of a heavier application of the paint there. Maybe just one more, just a little bit brighter. That's going to create a nice color contrast where the rest of the painting is really quite drab. It's a nice bright set of blowing trees. Might catch our attention a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go to my number 8 bright, wet it in my jar. And I'm going to get some of my dark color. And let's start adding just a few little details to our house. So I'm going to come from under the eave here. And same thing, right at that same angle, drag it straight down. Just let it kind of fuzz out wherever it's going to. Again, I am not looking for complete coverage on this house. Say the edge is right there. Maybe I'll make this side a little bit darker. Let's throw a bit of blue in there. That'll be fun. Into that shadow color. Helps make it seem a little bit darker. We can put just a tiny hint of it down here as well. Throw some white into our mix. And pop a couple highlights. Be right here. Little extra black, more white, and let's do a bit on the roof. So I'm just going super, super simple here. Right at the top edge there, kind of say where that edge is, drag it down. See, I didn't even take it all the way to the bottom of the roof. We can get a little bit of a different color, maybe a little more brown, a little more white. And now we'll come from the bottom edge and drag it up. Nice light color, but I don't want a ton of it on my brush. Just a few little dusting hints of a highlight color, a little bit of a lighter color on the face of our house. Maybe on the edge here, just to say that's where the edge is, the other side is dark. A little bit of black, and we'll add a door. So I'm going to come in like this, touch where the door is going to be, and then lightly drag it to one side or the other. And there's a hint of a door. If you feel like it doesn't show up good enough for you, wipe your brush off, get a little poke of white, come up here and just put a tiny, just like that. Now our door shows up nicely, and we can even go around the edge here a bit. Don't draw a hard white outline. See, I'm just kind of touching, letting there be a little bit of a highlight in just a few places. Let's get our black brown, a little bit of blue, a little bit of this green color, much darker than what's already on the trees. And I'm just going to come into the bottom and just kind of add a little bit of a shadow color under there. Now I'm going to go to my fan brush, and I know that not everybody is a fan of the fan brush. See what I did there? So you can use whatever you like for doing grasses. Sometimes I like the fan brush, sometimes not. Today felt like a fan brush day. So I've got my black brown, and there was a hint of white in there, and that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to mix up a dark green. The best way to mix paint with your fan brush, because I know going like this, sometimes you just get stripes, kind of take it and squidge it back and forth like that. Flip it over, squidge it back and forth again. That really helps to load the paint up in your brush, but also mix the colors together. Little speck of water. So I have quite a bit of paint loaded up in here, and I'm going to start kind of in the distance, but I'm not going to put a ton of pressure back here in the distance. See how I'm really just kind of touching with the very front of the brush. Don't go over your tornado, not just yet. Let it kind of fade out as it goes back here. Just kind of outlining where everything's going to be and the shape of our hill. I know we've got little eyelash shapes there now, and that's okay. I'm not worried about that. We're going to do a couple of quick layers on here. It's going to be a pretty simple grass area. We just don't want to lay down big shapes back here in the distance. But as we start to get forward, see, I'm putting a little extra pressure on my brush. Still not crossing over the tornado. And down here in the front, see, I'm really putting about full pressure on the brush, and it can go over the bottom edge of the tornado there a bit. I'm not trying to cover all of that underpainting. It may still show a little bit, and that's okay. Smaller shapes, smaller dabs as we move back here. Let's pop a little bit of brightness into that. A little extra water. More with that heavier pressure toward the front. Lighter pressure toward the back. See, now we're starting to get just a very slight, a very subtle grass texture and look. Let's go one brighter, just mixed in the rest of that yellow. Right up here in front of our house, I'm going to do very light pressure and really just kind of brighten up the ground there. You can even bring it up just a little bit so it covers the base of the house. As it comes down the hill, tilt your brush a little and then lighten the pressure. Let's let it kind of fade out as it goes down the hill. See, it's that little bounce again. So it's, you know, kind of dotting and just kind of bouncing. You can come up here to right in front where it's closest to us and just kind of do some little grassy shapes. Keep them going in all different directions, especially, you know, with the wind, the grass is going to be blowing around. Pulled you over a little bit so you could get a better look without that dumb glare. And I'm going brighter. Let's keep just a few bright grasses here in the front. Very light pressure, see that? Very light pressure. Just kind of dashing upward. Nice and bright, right in front of our house. That's going to help draw our eye right to that doorstep. And if you decide you don't like that tall grass, you can do the little textury grasses right back over it. And I might. And I think we'll leave it for now. Don't be afraid to let that kind of overlap the little dust cloud at the bottom of our tornado. Okay, I really have just one more thing I want to do to this, and then I feel like I'm done, but this is all pretty wet in the grass, so I want to let that dry first. So I'm going to give it about 15-20 minutes just to let this grass dry, and we'll be right back. All right, last part, and we are done. So I'm going to take my number 8 bright again and just get some black brown. And we're going to make some little fence posts, just kind of general. I'm going to use the edge and start right here, maybe just kind of tap in a little shape, and they don't have to be straight. You know, if there's a storm, they might be kind of crooked from this storm and other storms. Just make them a little bit smaller as we go back. And maybe we'll take a little cross beam from one to the other. Just using the edge. And we'll take that one right off the edge. And then maybe we'll have another one that kind of comes back. This little fence comes back around. This one's closer to us. And let's have one right here. See, I'm just kind of pulling these little lines down. They're not real even. They're not even real solid, and that's okay. And maybe that one comes down. It's a little broken. It's on the ground. Let's get a little hint of white. And we can come back here and just kind of touch. Let's get a little bit more white than that. Just kind of touch. See, it's not a brush stroke. I'm really just kind of tapping that line. And the color sticks where it sticks. And it doesn't stick where it doesn't stick. I'm going to add a little bit of brown into my brush for these forward ones. And we'll go across the top here. Just kind of on the top of this post, maybe just a hint of it right there. And I think I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm just going to get some yellow and I'm going to sign it. And there's your stormy sky with a tornado. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with it. So make sure that you find me on Facebook and Instagram so that you can share your version with me. Just search for Painting with Jane and you'll find me. Again, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and then the bell icon so that you can get a notification each week when I upload a new video. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.